The Manhattan skyline glittered against the glass walls of the 40th floor boardroom. It was one of those rooms where every chair seemed more expensive than most people's monthly rent. At the head of the table sat Richard Warren, a self-made millionaire known for his ruthless business instincts and his ability to close deals that no one else could. That morning, Richard had one goal: secure an exclusive partnership with a French luxury goods company that could double his net worth in a year. He had spent weeks preparing presentations, setting up charts, and rallying his team. His assistants buzzed around like bees, making sure every detail was flawless. There was just one problem. The company's lead negotiator from Paris had arrived without his translator. The French delegate, Monsieur Leclerc, spoke almost no English. Richard had assumed someone on his staff could bridge the gap, but when the meeting began, awkward silence filled the room. "Come on," Richard said through clenched teeth, looking around the table. "Someone here must speak French." "Anyone?" His executives glanced at each other nervously. One stammered something about taking French in college, but quickly admitted he remembered nothing. Another tried using a translation app, but the phrases came out garbled, making Monsieur Leclerc chuckle politely yet unimpressed. The tension grew. Millions of dollars were at stake, and every second of miscommunication was pushing the deal further away. Richard's jaw tightened as he tapped his pen against the polished mahogany table. Outside the boardroom, life in the building went on as usual. Downstairs, the cleaning staff prepared lunch trays, washed dishes, and cleared the mess left behind by executives too busy to clean up after themselves. Among them was Miguel, the dishwasher. He had worked at the company for over a decade, but was invisible to the men in suits upstairs. Miguel's teenage daughter, Sophia, often came by after school to help her father or wait for him before they headed home together. That day, she sat quietly in the lobby, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware of the chaos unraveling above her. Inside, Richard felt sweat bead at his temples. His empire's expansion depended on this moment. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "I can't believe not one of you can hold a conversation in French. Do you realize what this means? We're about to lose this deal." His team exchanged nervous glances. They had never seen him this rattled. Richard prided himself on control, but control was slipping fast. Monsieur Leclerc leaned back, unimpressed, muttering in French about how Americans never prepared properly for international business. If Richard could have understood the words, his pride would have been crushed. He slammed his hand on the table. "This meeting is falling apart," he snapped. "We need a solution, now." What he didn't know was that the solution wasn't sitting at the table. It was sitting downstairs, waiting for her father to finish his shift. The silence in the boardroom was suffocating. Richard's chest tightened as he realized the opportunity was slipping through his fingers. He had worked too hard, climbed too far, and sacrificed too much to let something as simple as language ruin him. But here he was, cornered by words he couldn't understand. Monsieur Leclerc adjusted his cufflinks, his expression unreadable. Every tick of the clock echoed like a countdown to disaster. Richard barked orders. "Find me someone, anyone, who speaks French. I don't care if you have to pull someone off the street. Just fix this." His assistant, Julia, scrambled out of the room, nearly tripping over her heels. She dashed down the hall, past rows of cubicles, and into the lobby. Her heart raced as she tried to think of a plan. Where could she possibly find a French speaker on such short notice? That's when she noticed a girl sitting quietly near the reception area, a backpack slung over her shoulder. Sophia. She looked like any other teenager, sneakers, jeans, and hair pulled into a ponytail. Julia would have walked right past her if she hadn't heard the sound coming from Sophia's phone. French, perfect French. Sophia was on a video call, laughing with her cousin overseas, switching between English and French effortlessly. Julia froze, then slowly approached. "Excuse me," she said, slightly breathless. "You speak French?" Sophia blinked, caught off guard. Yeah. Why? You need to come with me. Right now," Julia insisted, already grabbing her arm. "What, wait? I'm just waiting for my dad." "He's—" "No time," Julia cut her off. "This could save the company, please trust me." Before Sophia could protest, she was being half-dragged into the executive elevator, her backpack still dangling from one shoulder. Her sneakers squeaked against the marble floor as the doors closed. When they arrived back at the boardroom, the atmosphere was even heavier. Richard stood near the head of the table, his patience gone. His eyes narrowed as Julia burst in with Sophia. "What is this?" he snapped. "I said find me a translator, not a child." Julia swallowed hard. Mr. Warren, she speaks fluent French. The room erupted in murmurs. Executives exchanged skeptical looks, some smirking at the absurdity. Richard's face darkened. He was seconds away from dismissing them both when Monsieur Leclerc sat forward, intrigued. Permettez-moi d'essayer, Leclerc said, raising an eyebrow. Sophia hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding. Then in flawless French, she replied, Bien sûr, monsieur. Je suis prête à vous aider. The room fell silent. The fluency, the accent, and it was undeniable. Monsieur Leclerc's eyes widened with surprise. He leaned back, chuckling, clearly impressed. For the first time all morning, Richard's jaw unclenched. He studied Sophia, then said slowly, If you can actually do this, you'll save this meeting. Sophia swallowed hard, meeting his gaze. I'll do my best. And just like that, the dishwasher's daughter stepped into the center of the millionaire's empire. The boardroom was still buzzing with disbelief. A janitor's daughter, a teenager. How could she possibly handle something this big? Richard could hear the whispers bouncing across the long, polished table. Is this a joke? One executive muttered under his breath. This is embarrassing, another hissed, shaking her head. Richard raised a hand, silencing them. His eyes drilled into Sophia. All right, he said coldly. Prove it. Monsieur Leclerc leaned forward, his expression sharpening. Mademoiselle, he said in French, his tone slow and deliberate. Do you even understand the magnitude of this conversation? We are discussing millions, billions. This is not a classroom exercise. Sophia's palms were sweaty. For a second, the pressure felt unbearable. Everyone was watching. The CEO, the executives, the intimidating French businessman who held Richard's future in his hands. But then she remembered her father, how he always told her that language wasn't just words, it was power. And she wasn't about to let fear strip that away. In perfect French, she answered calmly, Monsieur, I understand more than you think. Please continue. I'll make sure your words are heard exactly as you intend them. The room went dead silent. Richard's brows lifted ever so slightly. Julia, standing in the corner, suppressed a grin. Leclerc chuckled softly, almost testing her. Très bien, he said. Then let's begin. He launched into a complex explanation about the partnership terms, tariffs, overseas logistics, intellectual property clauses. His sentences moved fast, his vocabulary sharp, clearly designed to trip her up. Sophia didn't flinch. She listened carefully, letting the rhythm of the words flow through her. Then she turned to Richard and the board, translating every detail with precision, not missing a beat. Mr. Leclerc is suggesting a 5-year exclusivity clause. He's willing to reduce tariffs by 20% in exchange for shared technology rights. He emphasizes that transparency will be non-negotiable. Gasps circled the table. Executives leaned forward, jotting notes furiously. Richard's eyes widened, not just at what was being said, but at how smoothly she was carrying it. Leclerc smirked, clearly enjoying the challenge. And tell your CEO, he added in French, that if his company cannot honor its word, I would rather walk away today. Sophia's heart skipped. The words were sharp, almost threatening. She glanced at Richard. This was the moment. Soften the blow or translate exactly. Her father's voice echoed in her memory again. Always speak the truth. Even if it hurts. She straightened her back and repeated it word for word in English. He says if your company cannot honor its word, he would rather walk away today. The words hit like a hammer. A few executives looked panicked. Julia bit her lip. Richard froze, his pride flaring. But then, to everyone's shock, Richard didn't explode. Instead, he slowly looked at Sophia, his expression shifting from disbelief to something else. Respect. For the first time, the girl wasn't just a translator. She was a voice of truth in a room full of power, and Richard realized he might need her more than he thought. The meeting rolled forward, each sentence heavier than the last. Sophia had expected nerves, but what she hadn't expected was how some executives seemed annoyed by her success. From the corner of her eye, she caught Mark, one of the senior VPs, glaring at her. He had been Richard's right-hand man for years, often the one running negotiations. Now suddenly, a janitor's daughter was stealing his spotlight. When Monsieur Leclerc paused to sip his water, Richard leaned back in his chair. Impressive, he said lowly, glancing at Sophia. But this isn't over yet. Can you keep this pace? Yes, sir, she replied firmly, though her stomach churned. Leclerc continued, speaking quickly, diving into environmental standards and sustainability clauses. The terms were layered, technical, but Sophia held her ground. Each phrase in French became clear English in her voice, confident and unwavering. But then mid-translation, she noticed something odd. Mark had leaned toward Julia, whispering under his breath. His words weren't audible, but his smirk was. When Sophia looked at him, he quickly glanced away, feigning innocence. Her instincts prickled. Something was wrong. Leclerc shifted tone, deliberately sharp now. "Tell your CEO," he said in French, "that his company must accept full liability for shipping delays. Otherwise, this deal is meaningless." Sophia blinked. Full liability? That was a massive risk, one no sane company would accept. For a moment she hesitated. Was this a test? Or was Leclerc pushing boundaries to see if Richard would cave? She opened her mouth to translate and then Mark suddenly cut in. "Mr. CEO," he said loudly, "the French delegate is offering to guarantee our company against shipping delays. Isn't that correct?" Sophia's jaw dropped. That wasn't what was said at all. Leclerc looked confused, frowning. His eyes darted to Sophia. "Pardon? That is not what I said." The executives began murmuring again, some nodding, some suspicious. Mark crossed his arms smugly, clearly trying to undermine her. Richard's eyes snapped to Sophia. "Well," he demanded, "which one of you is telling the truth?" The room froze. It wasn't just about words anymore, it was about trust. Sophia swallowed hard. She knew exactly what Mark was doing. He wanted her to look incompetent, to fail in front of everyone so the board would doubt her. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to look directly at Richard. "Sir, with respect," she said clearly. What Mr. Leclerc actually said was the opposite. He wants your company to accept liability for delays, not the other way around. Leclerc immediately nodded. "Oui, that is correct." Richard's expression darkened, his gaze snapping to Mark. The smug VP suddenly looked less confident, fidgeting with his pen. For a moment, the tension was suffocating. Then Richard leaned forward, his voice cold as steel. "Next time," he said to Mark, "let the translator do her job, or you won't have one." The room went dead silent. Mark's face burned red, but he said nothing. Sophia exhaled slowly, her heart pounding. She had just survived her first sabotage attempt. But something told her it wouldn't be the last. The meeting broke for a short recess. Executives stretched, phones buzzed, coffee was refilled. Sophia practically collapsed into a chair in the hallway, her pulse still racing. Julia hurried over, clutching 2 cups of coffee. "Here," she said, pressing one into Sophia's hand. "You look like you just went 12 rounds in a boxing match." Sophia gave a weak laugh. "Feels like it." She took a sip, her hand still trembling slightly. "Julius, did you see what Mark just tried to do in there?" Julia nodded sharply. "He twisted the translation on purpose. I could tell, even though I don't speak French. He wanted you to fail." Sophia leaned her head back against the wall, closing her eyes for a second. "Why, though? Why sabotage a deal that's worth billions? It doesn't make sense." Julia's eyes narrowed. "Unless..." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "Unless someone in that room doesn't want the deal to go through." Sophia opened her eyes, staring at her friend. The thought hadn't fully formed in her mind until Julia said it out loud, but now it rang painfully true. "Mark," Sophia whispered. "He was Richard's go-to guy before today. If this deal succeeds, Richard might rely on me more than him. Maybe he's afraid of being replaced." Julia frowned. "Or maybe there's something bigger. What if he has ties to the competition? If this deal falls apart, Richard's company loses its edge in Europe. Someone else gains." Sophia's stomach nodded. The stakes were higher than she thought. It wasn't just her credibility on the line. It was the entire company. At that moment, the restroom door opened and Mark himself stepped out, straightening his tie. He spotted the 2 girls in the hallway, his smirk returning. "Well," he drawled, "still playing translator janitor's kid? Careful, one slip and you'll sink this deal faster than you can mop a floor." Julia shot up from her chair. "Back off, Mark," she snapped. "She caught your lie in there and everyone knows it." Mark's smirk faltered for a second, but then he leaned in closer to Sophia, his voice low enough only for her to hear. "One mistake, just one, and you'll be the reason his empire crumbles." This wasn't just office politics anymore, this was a war. Everyone knew something had cracked, though no one said it aloud. The French CEO, Monsieur Laurent, sat back down and leaned toward his advisors. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it as he spoke in rapid French. Sophia focused on every word, her pulse quickening. Laurent said, If this company cannot even provide accurate translation, how can we trust them with our joint operations in Paris? Transparency is everything. The advisors nodded in agreement. Then Laurent's gaze turned sharply to Sophia. Mademoiselle, he said in French, if you are indeed capable, then I will ask you something myself. No papers, no whispers, no help. Translate my words directly to your CEO. The room went dead silent. Richard froze, his hand tightening on his pen. Everyone knew this was a moment of truth. Sophia swallowed, her throat dry. Of course, she replied softly in French. Laurent leaned forward, his voice slower now but heavy with meaning. Tell your CEO this. Trust is not built on contracts, but on respect. If he wishes our partnership to succeed, he must understand the weight of our culture and our history. We will not be treated as a stepping stone. Every syllable felt like a blade. Sophia could sense the test hidden in his words. It wasn't just about language, it was about nuance, dignity, diplomacy. She inhaled, turned to Richard and said firmly in English, Mr. Laurent wants you to know that contracts alone don't build trust. Respect does. He believes if this partnership is to succeed, you must truly understand the depth of French culture and history. They will not accept being treated as just another transaction. The room stayed still for a moment. Richard's face softened. For once, the steel executive seemed almost humbled. He nodded slowly, then looked directly at Laurent. Tell him, Richard said, that I hear him loud and clear. This partnership will be built on respect, not numbers alone. Sophia translated back in flawless French. Laurent's stern features cracked just slightly into the shadow of a smile. He gave a short nod, signaling approval. A collective breath filled the room, as though everyone had been holding it, waiting to see if the deal had just collapsed or been saved. But Richard wasn't done. He turned toward Sophia, his voice quieter but filled with weight. You've earned their trust, he said. Now, earn mine. The statement wasn't just praise. It was a challenge, a demand. And Sophia knew from the way Mark was glaring from across the table that not everyone wanted her to succeed. This was only the beginning. The meeting pressed on, but the tension hadn't eased. Sophia could feel eyes drilling into her back, Mark's especially. He sat stiff, jaw tight, as if every successful translation of hers was an insult carved into his ego. Monsieur Laurent, however, seemed almost intrigued now. His voice shifted from cautious to probing. He wasn't just negotiating business anymore. He was testing her limits. He leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and spoke deliberately in French. Tell me, mademoiselle, what does America know of honoring traditions? Would your CEO know when to bow, when to shake hands, or when to toast? Words are easy, culture is harder. Sophia's chest tightened. This wasn't just a translation. It was a trap. If she delivered Laurent's words bluntly, Richard could take offense. If she softened them, Laurent would know she was sugarcoating. The room was still, every executive watching. Sophia glanced at Richard, then back at Laurent. And then, she took a risk. She translated word for word, her voice calm but respectful. Mr. Laurent asks what America knows of honoring traditions. Would you, Mr. CEO, know when to bow, when to shake hands, or when to raise a toast? He says words are easy, now, but culture is harder. Gasps escaped from a few executives. Richard's eyes narrowed. For a heartbeat, everyone thought he would explode. But then Richard leaned back in his chair, his sharp business mask cracking into something more human. He looked straight at Laurent and said in English slowly, Then teach me. Show me your traditions. I'm not here to bulldoze. I'm here to learn. Sophia's chest loosened with relief as she translated. Laurent's brows lifted slightly. The Frenchman clearly hadn't expected humility from a powerhouse CEO. He gave a small nod of approval. Perhaps, he replied in French, your company has more to offer than I thought. But the moment of peace didn't last long. Mark suddenly spoke up, his tone dripping with irritation. Excuse me, but this is wasting valuable time. We're here to discuss contracts, not cultural philosophy. Laurent's eyes snapped to him, ice cold. He muttered something sharp in French. There, that is exactly the arrogance I despise. Sophia's blood ran cold. She couldn't ignore it, she had to translate. Her voice trembled slightly as she said in English, Mr. Laurent says, that is exactly the arrogance he despises. The room froze again. Mark's face flushed crimson, rage flickering behind his eyes. Richard turned his head slowly, pinning Mark with a glare so sharp it could cut steel. "Mark," Richard said, his voice low and dangerous, "not another word." Mark swallowed hard, but his glare slid back to Sophia, full of venom now. And in that second, Sophia knew. She hadn't just gained the respect of the French delegation. She'd also made a powerful enemy within her own company. The meeting finally concluded with a tentative nod from Monsieur Laurent. The atmosphere had shifted. Where there had been skepticism, now there was curiosity. Sophia had helped build that fragile bridge, but as the French delegation left the conference room, Sophia could still feel the storm brewing behind her. Richard shook hands with Laurent one last time and gave Sophia a quick glance, something between gratitude and calculation. Then he walked out with the senior executives, leaving Sophia behind with her thoughts. Mark lingered. His voice was low, venom dripping from every syllable. "You think you're clever, don't you? Little janitor's daughter saving the day." Sophia froze, clutching her notebook. "I just did my job." Mark leaned closer, his jaw tight. "No, you embarrassed me. You made me look like a fool in front of the CEO and our guests." "You did that yourself," Sophia whispered before she could stop herself. His eyes narrowed, lips curling into a cold smile. "Careful. People like you don't last long in places like this." And with that, he stormed out, leaving Sophia's stomach in knots. Later that evening, in the quiet of her small apartment, Sophia replayed the day over and over. She thought of her father, the janitor who worked late nights scrubbing the same floors Richard and Mark walked on with polished shoes. He'd sacrificed everything so she could have opportunities he never had. And now, for the first time, she had been the one holding the room together. Not because of a title, not because of money, but because of her skills, her courage, her voice. Yet she couldn't shake Mark's threat. The next morning, when she returned to the office, whispers followed her down the hall. Colleagues glanced at her, some with admiration, others with suspicion. The story had spread. The janitor's daughter had saved the CEO in front of the French delegates. In the break room, two assistants whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "Did you hear?" Apparently, she knows 5 languages, and Richard actually listened to her? That's insane. "Yeah, but Mark's furious. He's already telling people she overstepped." Sophia gripped her coffee cup tighter. Mark wasn't wasting any time. That afternoon, she was called into Richard's office. The CEO sat behind his massive oak desk, staring at her with an unreadable expression. On the table was a folder, thick with papers. "Sit," he said. Her heart pounded as she obeyed. Richard folded his hands. "Yesterday you saved us, but you also put yourself right in the line of fire. Do you know what that means?" Sophia hesitated. "That Mark won't forget?" Richard gave a sharp nod. "Exactly. He's already filing a complaint. Says you mistranslated, twisted Laurent's words to make him look bad." Sophia's mouth went dry. "That's not true." "I know," Richard interrupted, his tone calm but firm. "But in business, the truth isn't always what matters. It's perception." Her stomach sank. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. The next morning, Sophia was summoned into a small glass-walled conference room. Her pulse quickened the moment she saw who was waiting. HR Director Ms. Clark, a stern woman with silver hair, and Mark, already seated with a smug grin, a stack of papers in front of him. Sophia sat down slowly, her palms damp. Ms. Clark adjusted her glasses. "Sophia, thank you for coming. We've received some concerning reports about yesterday's meeting." Mark leaned back, feigning innocence. "Yes, I felt it was my duty to clarify what happened, for the integrity of the company." Sophia's jaw clenched. She could see exactly what this was, a carefully laid trap. Clark opened a folder. "Mark claims that you deliberately misrepresented Monsieur Laurent's words, that your translation was not accurate, which caused confusion and undermined his leadership in front of the delegation." "That's not true," Sophia said firmly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I translated exactly what was said. If anything, I softened some of Monsieur Laurent's critiques to keep the conversation productive." Mark let out a sharp laugh. "See, she admits she altered his words. That's manipulation, not translation." Sophia's stomach twisted. He was twisting her honesty into a weapon. Ms. Clark scribbled notes. "Mark, do you have any evidence of this claim?" Mark smirked and slid forward a USB drive. "Yes, I recorded the session." Sophia's eyes widened. "You recorded it without telling anyone?" Mark shrugged. "For my own reference. But it clearly shows how she twisted things, Ms." Clark raised an eyebrow but plugged it into her laptop anyway. The room filled with voices, the recording of yesterday's meeting. For several minutes, they listened in silence. Sophia's voice was clear, steady, translating Laurent's words. She braced herself, knowing Mark would pounce on any phrasing. Then he hit pause, right there. Laurent said, "We are unconvinced by your strategy." But she translated it as, "We have some concerns about your strategy." She downplayed it, made me look like I was overreacting when I pushed back. Ms. Clark turned to Sophia. "How do you respond to this?" Sophia inhaled sharply. "Translation isn't about word for word, it's about context." If I had said unconvinced, the meeting would have collapsed. I chose the phrase that conveyed their meaning while leaving room for discussion. That's what kept them at the table. Mark's grin widened. Or maybe you wanted to look like the hero, calming everyone down while I looked like the villain. The air was suffocating. After the meeting, Sophia sat alone on a bench outside the building, her hands trembling. It didn't matter that she was right. Perception was everything, and Mark had weaponized it against her. But as she stared at the city skyline, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but I was in that meeting yesterday, and I know the truth. Call me." Her breath caught. Could this be her only chance to prove herself? Sophia stared at the message, her mind racing. Who could this be? Why would a stranger risk contacting her? Her fingers hovered over the call button before she pressed it. The voice on the other end was calm, accented with a hint of authority. "Miss Sophia? My name is Claire Dubois. I was part of the French delegation yesterday." Sophia's breath hitched. One of Laurent's team members. If anyone knew the truth, it was them. "I don't have much time," Claire continued. "But I wanted to thank you. The way you translated Laurent's words, you saved the meeting. If you had repeated his criticism exactly, the deal would have ended there." Relief washed over Sophia, but it was short-lived. "Claire, they're trying to use that against me. The assistant Mark claims I manipulated the translation." There was a pause. Then Claire's voice hardened. "That man is dangerous. I saw how he looked at you, how he twisted your words. Listen carefully. Laurent respects what you did. He knows the difference between literal and diplomatic translation. If Mark tries to bury you, we will not stay silent." Sophia's heart pounded. For the first time since the trap meeting, she felt hope. "Would you be willing to say that officially? To HR or the board?" Another pause. Claire sighed. "I can, but it must be handled carefully. Corporate politics are delicate. If Laurent speaks, no one will dare challenge him. But you must first survive until then." Sophia swallowed. "Survive how?" Claire lowered her voice. "Do not confront Mark directly. He wants you angry, defensive. Instead, gather your own evidence. There is something in the recording he gave HR." "Did you notice?" Sophia frowned, replaying the memory in her mind. The way Mark had pressed pause, the smug certainty. "What do you mean?" Claire said firmly. "The audio was edited. I could hear the jump, a missing phrase. He's not just twisting context. He's cutting out parts that prove you right." Sophia's stomach flipped. Of course, that's why he was so confident. He had doctored the file. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the phone. "You don't know what this means." Claire's voice softened. "Prove the recording is fake, Sophia. Once you do, the truth will destroy him." The call ended, leaving Sophia trembling with adrenaline. She stood, determination burning in her chest. Mark thought he had cornered her, but now she had an ally and a weapon. As he left, her father squeezed her hand. "You've already made us proud, Sophia. Now the world will know who you are." Later that evening, as she walked out of the skyscraper, the city lights glowing like stars at her feet, Sophia paused by the lobby glass. She saw her reflection, not the janitor's daughter anymore, but a woman who had fought, endured, and won. Mark's downfall would be talked about for months. But her rise, that was only just beginning. With Paris ahead of her and a career she had only dreamed of, Sophia finally allowed herself to whisper the truth aloud. "I belong here." And for the first time, she believed it. In the end,